And here's an exercise for you. Take a look at the diagram. Do you see how the meaning of the automatic thoughts are connected with Jim's core beliefs? Fill in the core belief box. Now let's look at the behavior boxes at the bottom. The behaviors written there are quite typical for Jim. So we could draw an arrow from the behavior boxes to the coping strategies box. In fact, for your next exercise, go ahead and write the behaviors in the coping strategies box. And here's a clinical tip for you. The reason there isn't an arrow from the behavior boxes to the coping strategies box is that in some situations, clients exhibit atypical behavior. For example, at one point, Jim spoke harshly to his mother when she asked him if he were still looking for a new job. But he hardly ever does that. If we put speaks harshly when he perceives criticism in the coping strategies box, it would mean that it was an important behavior for us to target in treatment. But it wasn't. Next, we'll look at Jim's assumptions, the beliefs that link his coping strategies to his core beliefs. The format is something like this. If I do my coping strategy, I'll be okay. But if I don't, my core belief will become evident. Write Jim's assumptions in the box. Then compare what you wrote with this diagram. Finally, let's take a look at how Jim developed such negative core beliefs about himself.
What kind of experiences did he have during his lifetime that can help us understand, why he got so depressed now?
Growing up, he came from a pretty large family. He had 3 older siblings, 2-parent household. However, there was a lot of pressure that was put on him. Being that he was the youngest, he was constantly compared to his older siblings. Mm-hmm. They did fairly. I don't want to say fairly well. Actually, did very well in school, mm-hmm. And so he was constantly compared by his parents to be as successful as they did in school, as well as his siblings were also pretty harsh in regards to kind of teasing him when he didn't do well. He was pretty much a good A and B student where, he was always compared with his older siblings who attained straight A's. So a lot of pressure was put on him, and he was constantly measured up. He didn't have really a great relationship with his father. His father was pretty cold. He really said he received any emotion from him. He had a better relationship with his mother, who he said was a little warmer towards him. However, she was pretty critical of his achievements also. She would definitely be very critical when he had any missteps or he didn't measure up to that, to what his older siblings have. Right. And so a lot of that, over the years through his younger adult life, began to take a toll.
Here's an important clinical tip. You might not be able to specify the core beliefs that these themes reflect right away, not unless you do the downward arrow technique to find the meaning of his thoughts, or unless your client expresses his core beliefs as automatic thoughts. Jim, for example, was sitting on the couch one evening, thinking about his life. He had the thought, "I'm a worthless failure." He wasn't only referring to one situation. For example, "I'm a worthless failure because I lost my job." He was referring to himself in very broad terms. He was a worthless failure through and always had been. Not only because he lost his job, but because his new job was, in his words, beneath him. Because he was living in his parents' basement, having financial problems, getting divorced, not seeing his kids, not having friends, and so on. So this specific automatic thought was also his core belief.